Many people who smoke are very afraid of gaining weight when they stop. After working with smokers for 20 years, I happen to know that this doesn't need to be the case when your mind is in the right place. Many people begin a powerful journey of getting healthier and slimmer when they snuff out their final cig or puff their vape for the last time. In today's Thin Thinking podcast, my guest, Melanie Lee, will prove this point not only with her wonderful story of stopping smoking, but how quitting prompted her to begin a journey of self-love, which included releasing weight. She has now let go of 52.4 pounds so far. So learn the shifts she made in her thinking in our 56th episode of the Thin Thinking podcast. Come on in. Did you know that our struggle with weight doesn't start with the food on your plate or get fixed in the gym? 80% of our weight struggle is mental. That's right. The key to unlocking long-term weight release and management begins in your mind. Hi there, I'm Rita Black. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, weight loss expert, best-selling author, and the creator of the Shift Weight Mastery process. And not only have I helped thousands of people over the past 20 years achieve long-term weight mastery, I am also a former weight struggler, carb addict, and binge eater. And after 2 decades of failed diets and fad weight loss programs, I lost 40 pounds with the help of hypnosis. Not only did I release all that weight, I have kept it off for 25 years. Enter the Thin Thinking podcast, where you too will learn how to remove the mental roadblocks that keep you struggling. I'll give you the thin thinking tools, skills, and insights to help you develop the mindset you need, not only to achieve your ideal weight, but to stay there long term and live your best life. Sound good? Let's get started. Hello, hello, hello. Come on in and just take a deep breath and exhale and center yourself. We are going a little outside the box today, or of our Thin Thinking podcast. Not completely. We're just stepping our toe outside the box, because today we are talking a bit about smoking cessation, but with gliding right in to weight mastery, because my coming up guest, Melanie Lee, has stopped smoking, but then began her weight release journey, which is really exciting. And I can't wait for you to hear what she has to say about her journey, because here's the thing. So many people, I mean, I have seen thousands and thousands of smokers over the years that I've been a hypnotherapist, 20 years, and helped many. Those are my two things, right? That's my jam. Helping people stop smoking in one session and helping people master their weight and find thin thinking. And those things are my greatest joys, because those things were my greatest pain personally myself. And for those of you who don't know me too much or know my story, I am a former pack and a half a day smoker, and I stopped smoking first with hypnosis before I even lost weight. And here's the thing about me and smoking is I actually began smoking. Well, I began it socially. So here's the thing. I was this nerdy, overweight person, living in Seattle, Washington, going to high school. And I didn't smoke in high school. I wasn't one of those cool kids. I was never that cool. But I moved to New York City in the 80s, and everybody smoked. Everybody. I mean, and I tried a couple of times to smoke, and I couldn't. And then there was one night I went out, and this is, I thought my story was unique, but I have learned from working with thousands of smokers that this is not an uncommon story, where they might have tried smoking, didn't like it, and then like we're out one night, had a few too many drinks and smoked, and then really got hooked. And that is certainly what happened to me. Some people, the first puff they take, they're hooked, but it took a little while for me. But once I was hooked, I was really, really hooked. And what I thought smoking gave me was a way to manage my weight because I could smoke instead of eating. But over time, that didn't really help me out because, like, I don't know if any of you, and I'm assuming that because I have worked with many, many smokers who have a lot of fear about gaining weight when they stop. And I know many weight people, people who struggle with their weight, who smoke secretly or on the side or vape, again, as a way to manage their weight. Um, so, I struggled with my weight despite the fact that I smoked, but I continued to smoke thinking I would gain even more weight if I stopped. Now, I tried to stop many times, and when I did stop, I did gain weight. I would gain, sometimes 10 pounds. Once I gained over 20 pounds when I quit smoking. But that is because I stopped smoking in the wrong way. And, there's really not a right way or wrong way, but there's a powerful way to become a non-smoker. So anyway, not to get off track, but I guess I did. But I just want you to know that I understand and what happened for me. And if you are out there and in the place I want to speak to you. And I wanted to say that, I had to sit myself down because I was very afraid of gaining weight when I did hypnosis to stop smoking. And I kind of had to have a little conversation with myself and I. And I said, look, girl, you are smart. And, continuing to smoke is not a long-term weight strategy. I mean, think about it. It's not. And I have many, many clients who are in their 50s and 60s and are afraid of gaining weight when they quit smoking, but they are now compromising their health, and it really just is not a long-term strategy. And worse than their health, well, not worse than their health, obviously, but alongside their health, what happens is when we continue to smoke, it just starts to take away our power. Just like food takes away our power, certain foods take away our power. Well, smoking takes away the power from the smoker. So, anyhow, I sat down with myself and I just said, you can figure out weight management as a non-smoker. And that is really what I did. And I began my journey with hypnosis, and I really, started and opened. It was really a door opening for me. And I released 40 pounds and I've kept it off for 25 years. Now, that was a journey in and of itself. And if you've been listening to the Thin Thinking podcast, you know more about my journey. But, if you're a smoker and you're listening to this, well, that's my story. But anyway, I want you to hear Melanie's story. Melanie is so soulful. She's such a cool gal. And I can't wait for you guys to hear what she has to say about her own journey. But before we dive in, I just want to give you guys a couple of offers and say that this week, I have in the show notes a link to my free Shift Out of Sugar Cravings hypnosis session. So if sugar is your cigarettes, and there is sugar in cigarettes, FYI. But if sugar is your cigarettes, go check that out. And I also have, which is, for those of you who do smoke or those of you who have a loved one who smokes, I do have a free webinar link, or a masterclass link, I should say, to my masterclass called How to Stop Smoking Without Withdrawal, Cravings, or Weight Gain. So if that is of interest to you, go check that out in show notes. And now let's get on to my conversation with the fabulous Melanie Lee. So Melanie, nice to be here with you. And thank you for coming on and sharing.
Thank you.
Melanie, we have known each other, now, well, we were just saying right before we hit record that it's March of 2022 and you stopped smoking with Smoke Free 123 in March of last year, right?
That's right. That's right. It's been a year.
So And I didn't really know you at the time until you kind of found your way into the shift, because with Smoke Free 123, it's kind of, you do it on your own. It's an online hypnosis based smoking cessation course that you do on your own. But I really would love because I think people sharing their experiences is so helpful for other people, because there's so many people out there who smoke and are also afraid of like gaining weight after they quit smoking. So I think your story is very inspirational, because not only, did you stop smoking, but you began a weight journey after stopping smoking. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about you, um, and how life was like with regards to smoking prior to stopping. Like, what were you struggling with as a smoker? Because I think it's helpful for other people to hear your struggle.
Okay, so smoking was something that well, historically, when I was younger, a lot of people try it when they're a teenager, and I remember trying it and not really ever getting the hang of it, and just being like, oh, I can't even figure out how to smoke correctly, and it isn't really doing anything for me, so I'm just gonna stop doing this. This is stupid. And so when I was in my 20s, and my husband, or no, sorry, early 30s, I think, my husband was trying to quit smoking. And I was kind of irritated at him because he said something like, well, I could quit smoking if you stop bothering me about it. So I was like, oh, really? So I grabbed a cigarette of his, thinking it's not going to be a problem for me because I never could get the hang of it. And I had one cigarette of his. And it was like, it that's when I got it, right? And it did that
Right.
thing that it does to you, where you feel like kind of floaty, and I felt really kind of, I don't know, like buzzed, high, whatever it was, and it relieved stress. It felt like it was relieving something. So I was hooked, and
Mm,
that was something like 20 years ago now.
right.
And so, basically I found that as a thing to do that seemed, I thought, to take away my stress. It was a way to stop what I was doing. If I was stressed out at work, I could leave, and I could, take a walk around the block and have a cigarette. I could, if I'm at home, I could walk outside and have a cigarette. and
Yeah.
and if things were stressful enough, I could have several cigarettes in a row. I mean, and
It's
I've
a
tried countless times. I can't even count how many times since I started that I tried to stop. I've tried every possible way you could think of. I tried gum,
mhm,
I tried patches, I tried cold turkey. Actually, seemed to me, cold turkey seemed to work the best.
right.
But for me, just because but that process was having to force myself to endure the withdrawals, and it was really, really difficult. It felt to me really, really difficult and painful. And I never, I didn't ever want to get to that point. I was like, I'm smoking, I want to smoke, I'm doing this is like, I have to. I really felt like I had no choice
Melanie, can I
most of the
ask
time.
you a little bit more about like your journey as a smoker? So your husband was smoking and you were
Mm-hmm.
smoking as well. This was
Mm-hmm.
prior to having children, or was this after you had your children?
No, this was after I had my kids. Cigarettes for me weren't even in the picture at all until I was working maybe several months into a job when my kids, okay, well, no, I'm sorry. Well, it wasn't before my kids were born. It was they were about something like 2 and 5.
Okay. Well,
And
that
I
makes
was,
a lot of sense.
yeah, and my husband had lost his job. That when he came
Hmm.
out here on a job transfer, he lost his job. I had to get a job real quick, and my plan was not to be working. My plan was to stay home with my kids.
Okay.
So there was a lot of stressful
Wow.
things going on.
Yeah.
My life was not going the way I thought it was going to go. I wanted to be there for my kids. You know what I'm saying? Just a whole bunch of things.
Oh, yeah. And I am sitting here it kind of nodding my head, because can I
Mm-hmm.
tell you something? I get a lot of parents who come to me to stop smoking.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, how old are your children?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like 2 and 4. And I'm like, and I'll tell you why. Because when you have a 2-year-old and you have a 4-year-old, as you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
you do not have any time for yourself, right? You're
Yes.
there, and they're loud, it's chaotic. And then you're working on top of that for a
Oh yeah.
working mom, and even for a mom who stays at home. So much of smoking is an escape hatch from the chaos,
Yeah.
the kids, and as women, it's such a it's such a permission slip that we probably wouldn't give ourselves if we weren't going to smoke. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think food is too, because we're going to talk about food
Mm-hmm.
later, like going and escaping to the kitchen and
Yep.
having that like little snicky snack in the pantry is kind of an escape from family, from the moment, calming, whatever. So our brain starts to make that association like, oh, smoking calms me down, where
Mm-hmm.
ironically it doesn't, but it, elevates our heart rate, stimulates our central nervous system. But stepping outside when your kids are screaming and taking a 5-minute breath, breathing
Mm-hmm.
deeply, even though it's tainted with carcinogens and toxins,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to take the edge off, not the cigarette, which we give the power, but you take the edge off because you give yourself that break.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm not surprised. That's very interesting that you started at that. And you are not the only person. Like there are a lot of women who had smoking husbands who never smoked. And then after they had their children, they just picked it up for whatever reason, And then, so did your husband and you sit together and smoke as well? Like, was that a thing
Oh
too?
yeah, yeah. That also became like a ritual, like, hey, let's go outside together. And so it was kind of weird when one of us was like, okay, well, now I need to quit. Or it was just there were many, many years of he would quit and then I didn't, or I would quit and then he did it, and just went on and on. And then finally he was able to quit
Okay. He did it first.
completely,
Uh-huh.
just completely. And
And he
then
did it cold turkey, Melanie?
I think, yeah, I think so. Oh no, he might have used like what I tried to use, what was that? What's that newer one? Chantix.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
think he used Chantix, and
Okay.
that seemed to work fine for him. I tried it one time, it worked for me, one time it didn't. And
Yeah.
meaning I couldn't keep taking that actual medicine. It didn't respond. My body didn't respond well to
Yeah,
me
a lot of
with the
people
second
get
time.
sick from it or have like
Yeah,
really
yeah, I just couldn't
suicidal
do it.
thoughts. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, it felt really bad. And so uh this last time though that he had quit, he was actually quit for several years while
Okay.
I struggled with it. While I was just
Wow.
like, why can't
Mm,
I quit? I don't understand it. It was extremely frustrating to me.
yeah.
It was extremely demoralizing, like,
Right.
emotionally, mentally, that I just couldn't do it.
Right. And so I did want to point out with to listeners who maybe are smoking and smoke with their spouse, yeah, that smoking also becomes like an intimacy point. Like,
Mm,
again, when you have kids, when you put them down, it's like, oh, let's go smoke a cigarette. And
yeah,
it's sort of a entree into catching up on the day and talking that you might not do if you weren't going to smoke. So a lot of people, when they try not to smoke,
yeah,
they um, they stop talking. They're like, well, maybe we should smoke again so we could talk. So it becomes
yes,
and it's so important when you become a non-smoker, or just those of you out there listening to this, is to really, really understand that your brain is making that association of intimacy with the cigarette. The cigarette gets all the power. So it's so important when you become a non-smoker to sit down with your spouse as a non-smoker. So anyway, well, tell me
correct.
how you found my program. Like, how did you, I don't even know, like, did you see it
I
online? Did you
think it
refer to me?
was I think it was Facebook. I think I saw a an ad on Facebook, and I think I
Right.
went to it and I kind of looked at it and I was like, why not? And there might have been I had a friend that got me a book that started to make me think differently about my life a little bit,
Uh-huh.
that might have been, I don't remember if it was just before I was willing to buy
Hmm.
the course,
You're right.
or if it was after I got it that made me decide I'm going to do it.
Right. And for those of you who don't know it, the what the course is it's not, it doesn't, it's like a online, you do it
Mhm.
yourself, you listen to some coaching, you listen to some
Yes.
hypnosis, and you get follow-up hypnosis and meditations to, it's just like it's a transformational process to become a non-smoker that uses hypnosis and in one session pretty much. So
It's magical. Can I just say it's magical?
well, okay, you can call it magical. You are the magic. People say that all the time. They're like, "Oh my God, you are
Mhm.
like a miracle worker." And I'm like, "It's not me, it's your brain." When your
Mhm.
brain, works with itself, which is
Mhm.
what it doesn't do when we smoke, because 12% of our brain wants to quit smoking. The other 88% wants to keep right on smoking. And hypnosis just helps that 88% get together with the 12%, make the decision, hey, you know. But so for you, was the idea of hypnosis foreign? Was it like, I don't know about that hypnosis thing? Or were you open to it? I know,
I think in the past I might have been like, yeah, there's no way. That's not a thing. And at this point, I guess at that point I was like, well, you know what? I've tried everything else. And um I think I also felt like, I don't know, there was just something about the way that it was described that made me feel like, honestly, what harm could it do? And I don't I don't know if I remember for sure why I was willing to just go for it, but I did.
well, good.
I did, and I'm really, really grateful.
So when you went through the process, I know you did it on your own.
Mhm.
How was life after that then, like as far as and oh, well, let me ask you, Melanie, before we get into your
Yeah.
transition into being a non-smoker. I know I asked you this and you gave me the answer, but I just want our listeners to understand about, like, because we are talking, this is a weight management podcast,
Yes.
but so many women, especially men too, but more than you would think, FYI, um, are very, very afraid of gaining weight
Yeah.
after they quit smoking.
Yeah.
And I know for myself personally, that was a huge factor in me continuing to smoke for years. Was I'd struggled so much with my weight and I didn't want to gain more weight when I quit smoking. So, um, was that a concern when you know, decided to quit smoking? Like, were you worried
It
about that?
wasn't I think it was a fear, mainly because I didn't know it at the time, but I used food in much the same way as I was using smoking. And I
Right.
didn't know that, but what I did know is that um I remember in the past that I wouldn't have as nearly as much of an appetite when I was smoking as I did when I wasn't smoking. And I knew
Mhm.
that I would really want to eat. I knew that I would at some point after quitting smoking, I would want to eat a lot more than I was when I was smoking, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Right.
And my appetite would be back and I would feel hungry more often. And so I was afraid it would happen, but it wasn't like, at that point, it wasn't like a deal breaker for me. I wasn't thinking like, oh, I can't smoke. I can't stop smoking because I will gain weight or something. You
Right.
get what I'm saying? I
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
smoking to not gain weight,
Right. Right.
so it
Yeah.
didn't occur to me too much. But yeah, there was always a fear that, oh
Okay.
well, I guess that's what's going to happen. I just assumed that's what's going to happen. I'm going to gain at least 5-10 pounds, maybe even more.
Right. So then you went through the program, and how was that experience, like, as far as like just, doing the session and finishing and,
The stop smoking one.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is what it was like. I listened to it, and the first time I listened to it, I got up to the point where it said that I should be 100%
Uh-huh.
committed.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then I was like, I don't know if I am. I don't know if I am,
Right.
because of all the times that I quit before and wasn't successful or went back to it again,
Yeah.
right? And I also I felt completely dependent on it. I felt like
Yeah.
I could not go without it. And I was like, I don't know how I can say I'm 100% committed if I don't even know if I can live without it. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what was going to happen. So
Right.
I literally stopped right there.
Uh-huh.
I stopped for probably several weeks, if not a month,
Uh-huh.
before I went back to it and was
Good.
willing to try again.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? And I bet that is why you were successful. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people think hypnosis, like you said, it's magic, but it's magic when
Mm-hmm.
you are ready. And, I think if people have done hypnosis before to try to quit smoking, I think there's this really hard thing to explain to people as a hypnotherapist. It's the hardest part of my job is to
Mm-hmm.
say hypnosis is powerful, it is so effective. However, um, because your conscious mind needs to be in that place of like wanting to stop, um, you can't come to this like, well, you're going to make me want to quit smoking. That magic, is going to just like, I could sit here with my arms crossed and say, you're not going to make me quit smoking. And then, the session will, because people will send
Right.
people to me who are, people will call me all the time. Oh my gosh, you helped my cousin quit, help my husband quit smoking. And I'd be like, does he want to quit smoking? And they're like, no, but you're going to make him want to quit. Right. And I was like, well, no, your husband actually does need to want to stop for hypnosis to be effective. So, but I'm glad you brought this up, Melanie, because I think this is a clarifying point for a lot of people is that I think the litmus test for am I ready? Am I, really ready? Is what I'm getting from smoking currently being outweighed by what I know I would get from being free?
Yeah.
And more health, vitality, more money in my pocket, all those things. There comes a point where people are there's fear where we have to kind of sit with that fact that like we don't know, nothing is ever like 100%, but
Mm-hmm.
we know like we're such a slave of cigarettes and they so own us that willingness, it's like I use an analogy in the program. I say, it's like being in an abusive relationship and, you know, being willing to leave and create something new. And I don't know if that's exactly right, but it's that the place of smoking, we, like it's a relationship in our mind, and our cigarettes are like a friend, like you were saying. It's like,
Yeah.
it's very hard to leave. But then when you realize that this friend is now, asking you for $12 every day and saying, I'm not going to pay you back, and kind of beating you up, sitting on your chest, making your chest feel heavy, and telling you, you can't live without me. It takes so much of your power away from you that's when I think people are like, okay, yeah, I'm really ready and to believe in myself. And I think really ultimately that's what you've done. This has been a really big journey for you of like really taking back ownership over yourself.
Yeah. And honestly, that was I think the tipping point was all of a sudden I was paying $10 a pack.
Yeah.
Literally. And I would have kept doing it, except I was like, I got sick of it. I was like, I kept going to the place where I was buying it from and being like, this is ridiculous. What am I doing? And finally I was like, no, you know what? This isn't worth it anymore. And
Right.
that's when I came back and I started the tape.
I know
The
everybody
whole I
still
am.
calls it tapes. I mean, when I started my practice, I mean, literally, it was cassette tapes. My old dinosaur brain has had to adjust to all these different modalities. But anyway, yeah, everybody still calls it. I'm listening to your hypnosis tape. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of digital now, but yeah, I get it.
It was actually on my iPad to bring it into this current century. It was on my iPad and I pressed the play button.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, cool. So you did it and you went through the
Mm-hmm.
program and you became a non-smoker. And how was that?
Did.
Like as far as like cravings, withdrawal, all that stuff? How was
It
that help?
was it was one of the easiest times for real. It was like it was amazing to me. Like I think I might have had some slight physical cravings for the first day or two, which is, normal, but it wasn't unbearable like it had been in the
Right.
past. And my attitude was so much better. I felt more positive and more confident and more at peace, I think, than I ever had. There wasn't a lot of fear
Oh,
in
cool.
it. I was just like reinforcing. I just kept reinforcing, some of the ideas that you
Hmm.
had talked about, that I was, learning about in the process. And I just kept, reminding myself that I was a non-smoker, and I just kept going through the days. And there are still days, sometimes it's been a year, and there are
Uh,
days when I'll be in a new situation and I
yeah,
think of a cigarette and I'm like,
that's so weird.
look at this, I'm a non-smoker
I
experiencing this one thing,
know.
but as a non-smoker this time. And it's like, it's really freaking cool.
That is cool. You bring up a very important point is that every time you go through a new thing as a non-smoker,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times your brain will bring it up. I mean, and then
Mm-hmm.
you dismiss it. Okay, no, I'm a non-smoker doing this now. But
Yeah.
yeah, it takes a few years to go through all those life experiences, or you have a really big thing, like a negative thing that happens or a positive thing that happens, and you're like, oh, I'm doing this as a non-smoker. How cool is that?
Mm-hmm. It's
So,
neat.
yeah, I mean, it's so strange. I had a dream about smoking because I still like I've been a non-smoker for 25 years, and I had a
Mm.
dream about that I was smoking maybe about 6 months ago. And it was so weird. I always know that I'm really stressed out when I dream about smoking. And it's always, but the funny thing about the dreams is because I'm a hypnotherapist and I help people
Mm-hmm.
stop smoking. In the dream, I go, well, you can always just do self hypnosis and
That's great.
stop
That's
yourself from
great.
smoking. And it's so weird. But I wake up and I'm like, oh, good. I'm still not a smoker. Oh my God. That was so weird. Okay. Well, anyway. So Melanie, let's talk about now. Like, so you became a non-smoker. And what made you kind of transition into like now I'm ready to work on my weight? Like what kind of talk us through that transition?
Honestly, okay, I would not have purposely gone out and said, okay, now I'm going to work on my weight, because I literally just assumed that this is just my life now. Like,
Hmm.
I literally just assumed my body doesn't lose weight anymore. I am
Right.
50, whatever. I think I was, well, I'm 50. How old am I now? I'm 51. So I was 50 years old when I started this. Okay.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
yeah. So I just figured, when you're 50, your body just doesn't lose weight anymore. Like, this is
Right.
where I'm at now. This is how it's always going to be. I have a sedentary job. I don't like exercise. I like to eat things like this. Then I'm just going to keep eating the things that I like. And that's just how it is. So, except for the fact that I had found you through
Hmm.
the smoke free process. And then I saw something that you had emailed and said, oh, there's also this other thing. You want to check it out? And I was like, all right, sure, whatever, why not? And I checked it out. And then I was like, let's just see what happens. I had absolutely no expectations, except for the fact that the smoke thing worked so well.
Right.
I thought, if that works so well, maybe this will also work really well.
Yeah.
And it has.
Right. So you have over the course of a year,
Mm-hmm.
I think as you signed up, you did the shift weight mastery process last spring, right? And the spring of 2021.
Yeah.
And in one of the most weird years of on the
Yes.
planet.
Yep.
And you've released, as of today, you told me 52.4 pounds. So
That's
great
right.
that you're so exact. So
Yep.
now I know, and because you've been working at your weight mastery journey, because that's what we do when we are not like dieting, but we're on a weight
Mm-hmm.
mastery journey.
Mm-hmm.
What was it about hypnosis and meditation and the process that was helpful for you? And maybe talk by a little bit about like how you struggled before with weight, like like it sounds like you had kind of given up and you were kind of
Mm-hmm.
resigned about weight, but just uh what were your hopes? What were your with weight? Like, did you struggle with weight your whole life, or was this something that did you feel like you put on a few pounds, in
Um,
your 30s, or how did that all
I
go
can
through?
tell you that I struggled with the concept of weight for most of my life since I was probably starting from about between 8 to 10 years old on. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I was not overweight as a
Mm,
kid at all.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I thought I was.
Yeah.
If I look back at pictures, I was pretty skinny.
Isn't that
And if I look
amazing?
at pictures from when I was a teenager where I thought I was fat, I
Yeah.
was pretty skinny.
Yeah.
I had parents who were one parent who was very overweight, one
Mm-hmm.
parent who was not at all overweight but was very weight conscious,
Mm,
and both of them had serious judgments over how my body looked. Both my
mm,
my mom and my dad,
mm.
and
So
so
often that happens.
and
Yeah.
then I had
Gosh.
judgments about myself. Like there's an ideal way that I guess girls are supposed to look. And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought if I didn't look like that and that I was fat or whatever it was. And so it's amazing to me when, like I said, when I look back at those pictures and realize I wasn't at all. But I had no concept of um how to eat to be to feed my body in a way that helped it.
Mm-hmm.
I there were certain kinds of snack food that I grew up with that I would use that just made me feel better
Mm-hmm.
over, stress or feeling lonely or feeling sad or whatever it was. I would eat these things that I would make me feel better. And so those are the things that I would look for to eat,
Right.
right? I
Yeah.
I I never I mean, yes, I felt hungry, but in my, obviously everybody feels hungry, but the things I would choose to eat if I had a choice, if it wasn't like, whatever, I would eat the things that make me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying? So as I got older and my metabolism started slowing down, that's when I would just my I mean,
You
it
couldn't
got to
get
the
away
point
with
where
it anymore.
no, and my entire oh, okay, also, having two children,
Yes.
I would gain weight. I gained more and more weight every time I had a child. And so um I I'm trying to think. I was at an okay weight before I think when I started my job, the same job I started smoking in, which is, I love my job. It's still a job
Mm,
I still have and I just love it. But there's some moments of stress. And so I also work right across from a Wendy's.
oh my. Mm,
And I wasn't bringing my food to work. I'd just be like,
mhm,
oh, wow, I'm really hungry. It's lunch. I haven't really eaten that much. And I smell the fries and the things frying. And then that's what I eat for
mhm.
lunch for years. I've been in this job for 20 years.
Wow.
And
Mm,
every year I was gaining more and more weight.
yeah.
And I hate exercise. Did I tell you that? I hate exercise.
Doesn't help. Doesn't help. But
No.
so how did your I know you didn't really have any expectations so much when you signed up. So what
Yeah.
has been your experience? Like how was it in the beginning going through the
Mm.
actual 30-day process?
I, it was school.
Mhm.
Like I learned so much that I had no idea about. I learned about I learned about how calories actually work. Not that it's something that I have to keep track of because I'm a bad person,
Right.
right? Like
Yeah.
I learned a lot about how to be kind to myself in my mind,
Hmm.
and that tracking like how much calories I have and how much weight I'm where what the weight is that I am at according to the scale. All of those things give me information that helps me to know what steps to take. And it's not a judgment, and it's not about like I'm doing
Yeah, it's
anything
not
wrong.
punitive or it's not
Yeah.
about deprivation, but it's about really getting clear,
Yes.
and cognitively clear, like getting your brain out of cognitive distortion. I was good, I was bad,
Mm-hmm.
and also teaching your brain the value of foods for you. Like we were talking about
Yeah.
this before we turned on recording, that what I love where you're at right now is Melanie has cultivated a way of eating that she loves
Mhm.
that allows her to release weight and ultimately allow her to stay at her ideal weight. But it was through figuring stuff out by tracking and getting kind of clear on like, oh, and that you can eat nourishing foods, like you eat mostly nourishing foods, but that you can
Mhm.
still eat foods you love that are not
Mhm.
nourishing and
Mhm.
make them work together. But you have ownership over it,
Mhm.
and it's not some diet that you have to be on, be good on. And I think a lot of people shy away from tracking calories because they think of it as very old school, like, oh, it's like I have to count calories. And that
Mhm.
does seem like such a painful weight struggler identity thing, like, oh, that separates me. But it's so interesting because I, work with thin people as well, and
Mhm.
so many of them track calories too, just because once you get over a certain age, especially, it is really weight management becomes harder, and you just have to get clear of how much energy you're putting in your body and how much energy you're expending. And you have to kind of figure out a way of eating that works for you. And it's a process. And
Yes.
I think so. As you went through the process and started releasing weight, I know you've had, and it's not all butterflies and fairies. You've had, plateaus and things that have
Yes.
been very frustrating for you, but over time you have cultivated somewhat of a, not an absolute love affair with exercise, but you are now see yourself as more of an exercise person, right? Would you say that that's a true assessment, or maybe not?
I would say that I walk my dogs.
And you make that work for you, right? You make
Yes,
that
yes, because the whole I'm going to stand in front of something that tells me what exercises to do. It's just I don't want to do it. Like
yeah.
it seems boring to me and it seems torturous. And so even though I did it like many years ago and it kind of helped or whatever, I think I really just want to. I like the idea of of exercise being a side effect of something else that I'm doing. Like I have to walk the dogs anyway, right?
Yeah.
I would like to walk the dogs, I
Yeah.
guess. I like being outside. I like feeling being outside and smelling the fresh air and all of those things. So I've kind of made it be a thing that I want to do and need to do. And I've also, have people that work that walk with me during the day
Oh,
on
cool.
our lunch breaks or whatever. And so before I wasn't really too willing to do that. Like I would on my lunch break, I would get in my car and I would sit in my car and I would like play games and eat fast food. I mean,
Right. Right.
right? And now I'm not doing that. I
Mm.
am having my food that I brought with me from home that I know fits in my calorie budget. And then me and my coworker go out and walk around. Rita, I work by the beach.
Oh my God.
I
That's
work a block
amazing.
away from the beach. We take our walk and go down a block and go around the block and visit the beach and come back.
Oh,
And
nice.
that's like a mile and a half.
Wow. Gosh, that's great, Melanie. I mean, and the thing is with long-term permanent weight mastery, and what the shift program is based on is, data from tons of studies of people who've kept weight off permanently. And why I'm bringing this up right now is exercise,
Mhm.
because the majority of people that, were studied with regards to long-term exercise, most of them walk because it
Mhm.
is something you can always do no matter where you are, no matter what. Well, the weather does depend on, but we have people in our group, right, that, live in snow. They're always sending
Yeah.
us pictures of they're going out and hiking in the snow or wherever. You can make that work for you. And I agree with you that when you're doing something and it's not just exercising for exercise sake, but there's something like you're talking with somebody, your coworker, or you're walking your dog, it brings a different meaning to it that is so valuable.
Yes. And you know what? That reminds me of something. Should I bring up that injury that I had?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I forgot to mention this, but the same time as the pandemic happened, in the last week of July, around that time, right? So I'm guessing that was 2020.
2020. That was prior to your stopping smoking and all of that
Yes.
stuff, right?
Yes. So what happened was, my dog was barking,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in the backyard, and I wanted to stop it from barking. So I went around the corner, and as I'm trying to get around the corner in my backyard, I take a bad step down and got my foot wedged in between the step and the ground,
Oh,
and my entire body collapsed forward, and I heard my ankle snap.
oh,
It was bad. And so the reason I'm telling you this is because it took the entire next year and a half to get over that injury, and it was awful. I couldn't walk. I mean, obviously, right? Next, as soon as I could, I had to go in for surgery, and they had to, like, I still now have pins in
mm,
my ankle
wow.
and everything, right? I have like four pins and a plate or whatever, all holding it all together. And so the result of that was I couldn't walk. I couldn't dress myself all the time, because I needed help with that. It was humiliating. It
Mm,
was painful physically and emotionally and mentally. It was just horrible. And I knew for a fact that it wouldn't have been nearly as bad if I didn't have as much weight on me.
right, right.
So you asked me why it wasn't. Now that I think about it, it wasn't just because I quit smoking and Rita has a helping weight release program. It was because I really, really was sick of it.
Mm,
It took me several months to kind of process what happened in my mind
yeah.
and to realize where I was at. And I think it was just a low spot for me,
Mm-hmm.
and that I wasn't willing to have that in my life anymore. I,
Yeah.
and I think the quitting smoking gave me some hope that
Yeah.
that things can change,
Yeah.
that there was actually room for the possibility that I could do this
Yeah.
with help,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But that I could do it, and that it was worth trying.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a journey. I think becoming a non-smoker opens up your idea of yourself. It changes your idea of yourself, right? Like, because
Mm-hmm.
smoking is an identity. And when we become a non-smoker, it's like we step into a new identity.
Mm-hmm.
And with the shift, we also, when we struggle with our weight, one of the biggest challenges we have is that we see ourselves as a struggler. So any diet, anything we go on is already doomed because we don't believe in ourselves. We don't have any respect for ourselves. And so when we step into that apprentice of weight mastery, when we think of
Mm-hmm.
ourselves as a learner, it's such a transformation. And I could see, like, you became unwilling for things to stay the same. You know what I mean? Like, and I think we all reach a point where that, you know, there's that saying we talk about sometimes, the pain pushes until the vision pulls. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's painful smoking. It's painful struggling with your weight. But when you can get a vision of, like, ooh, I could be free. And I hear you, like, you were in pain and all that physical pain of uh, having weight on and trying to struggle with that pain. Oh gosh, that sounds
Mm-hmm.
so horrible, Melanie. That vision of you being a healthier person, a vibrant person. And I think what's been beautiful in watching you transform, because you definitely have been through a transformational journey and you're still on one,
Mm-hmm.
but that it is that critic, that inner critic,
Mm-hmm.
that, because we have such a vicious inner critic in us when we struggle with our weight, that you've turned down the volume on that and really
Mm-hmm.
really believe in
Thank you
yourself.
so much
Yeah.
for that. Like,
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. No, and I think, look at you, you're a leader. Like, you're getting other people to go out and go walking with you at lunch. People don't realize that when they make that decision to make their lives better, that they also impact all the people. Your kids are looking at you, and they see you taking care of yourself. And
Yeah.
that is going to model amazing behavior for them. Maybe not right now, but
Mm.
it may be. But down the road, when they're an adult, our kids are watching. you
They
know,
have told
they,
me, yeah, they have
we,
told me that they're proud of me and that they notice, and it's
yeah.
really neat. Yeah.
Yeah, because we can say things to them like, do this, do that. You're going to be happier when you do this, but they're
It's different.
watching you,
Yeah.
and they might listen to some of what you're saying, but no, they're like looking at, well, what's mom doing? How's she taking care of herself? How's that? Because my mom did not take care of herself at all. And I
Mm.
just was like, you don't, when you don't have a role model like that, it's hard to figure that out more for yourself too.
Mm.
Yeah. So good for you. It's so amazing.
Thank
Well,
you.
I want to thank you for sharing your story. So I guess one question I have, a last question, Melanie,
Sure.
is there anything like if somebody's struggling with, stopping smoking or losing weight, like, do you have any words of advice for them as far as just like how to take that first step for them? Like, from where a place for where you took that first step for you.
Mm. I would say, y- I mean, it's, I know this might sound trite, but literally believe in yourself, believe
Mm,
in yourself, you can do it. Like, it, this journey for me has been a lot about self-love that I didn't
mhm.
have before.
Yeah.
And I think that um, this process um, has done so much more for me than just smoking and releasing weight. It has taught me to care for myself and to
Yeah.
be kind and good to myself. And I think that if anyone is trying to, first of all, quitting smoking is such a huge gift for your entire life, for your health, for your feeling of being who you want to be. If you think that you can never do it, it's not true. It's not true. You have so much more power in you than those stupid cigarettes do.
Right.
Like you might not think you do, but you do. And this process taught me that. And the releasing weight thing, it's totally worth it. You're worth it. If you don't think you are, you will. You will believe that you are. It's a wonderful process, wonderful journey, and I am incredibly grateful
Oh, well,
that
thank
I
you.
met you and that I get to do this with you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. You are an inspiration, Melanie, and thank you
Thank
for
you.
being vulnerable and sharing all of this with
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you, Melanie. So I hope that Melanie and her amazing journey moved your heart and your thinking. So just a reminder to sign up for that Stop Smoking Masterclass or the Sugar Hypnosis or both. They are in the show notes, or send the links to someone you love. All right. So have an amazing week, you guys. And remember that the key, and probably the only key to unlocking the door of the weight struggle, is inside you. So keep listening and find it. Thanks for listening to the Thin Thinking Podcast. Did that episode go by way too fast for you? If so, and you want to dive deeper into the mindset of long-term weight release, head on over to www.shiftweightmastery.com. That's www.shiftweightmastery.com, where you'll find numerous tools and resources to help you unlock your mind for permanent weight release, tips, strategies, and more. And be sure to check the show notes to learn more about my book, From Fat to Thin Thinking, Unlock Your Mind for Permanent Weight Loss, and to learn how to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode.